All right, hi everybody, it's Susan, and today I'm here with Shannon Brandes, a mental health counselor. She's located in Southwest Florida. She was on this show a while back and we discussed some of the mental health suggestions for this crazy time that we're all currently dealing with. So I asked Shannon to come back on the show today so we could discuss more about like being proactive for our future because we're not super proactive as a whole. So hi and welcome to the show again, Shannon.
Hello.
Thanks for being here. How are you today?
Well, doing pretty good, even though amidst the rain that we desperately needed, or I'm actually doing quite well today.
Good. So I'm assuming you didn't get to go out on your jog this morning.
No, thankfully today was planned for an indoor workout, so it was all good. I'm looking forward to tomorrow, as we were just talking about before we started, just about it's going to be less humidity and I can get out and it's going to be a beautiful day tomorrow.
Excellent. Love
Yeah.
it. So anyway, I know that your time is super valuable and I want to just dive right into some of the things that, we had discussing today. So obviously we know no one was ready for the pandemic. Like that's clear just to see like how everything kind of played out as soon as, we started hearing about it. I'd like to start like at the top and then like go down to more of a personal responsibility. So do you feel like our society as a whole was prepared?
Not at all. I mean, the news reports obviously indicate that we struggled as a country just to, one, figure out what to do, when something like this happens. Do we shut down? What are the costs and the benefits to doing that in general? So I think that there was just a lot of confusion as to what really the right approach was. And then, just medically, we had a lot of issues with, not having enough ventilators, not enough IV bags, and recognizing that our country was just not prepared to be able to handle and sustain the amount of patients, that hospitals needed to, the hospitals were intaking during that time, and not having enough medical staff. And, there's just from even a global perspective, I mean, we're not ready at all with supplies, workers, facilities. The way that the government is just making decisions for us, that doesn't seem like people are really prepared to make those kinds of decisions, even, for the best of everyone, because it feels like, we're just kind of guessing to some degree.
I agree. So we're both in Florida, and so Florida, we just Ron DeSantis, our governor, had mentioned yesterday that we can start with this like slow and step-by-step plan to reopen. And to me, if I'm happy we're reopening, but it feels like a lot of even what he said is contradictory as far as like, hey, we're good. We didn't meet any of the crazy numbers we thought we were going to meet. And now we're kind of at this point where we can start reopening, but then yet for instance, restaurants, they can reopen at 25% capacity indoors, but they can have their outdoor seating as long as they're spaced 6 feet or, whatever he said. I feel like as a small business owner, like owning a little cafe or a restaurant or something, like, is it even worth it to reopen at that point?
Right. I know. I was thinking the exact same thing. Like, is it really worth it to have a 25% capacity, bring your employees back on? And then on top of that, I mean, again, is there risk? Is there not risk? If we're still, worried about risk, why bring 25%, capacity back on? What is the point in that?
Yeah, it seems like completely contradictory to me. Either it's kind of safe to go back to kind of how things were, or it's not safe. And again, I mean, we can go back to even the whole how our immune systems are supposed to function. So maybe the idea is to slowly kind of reacclimate to things, because I keep reading different things from doctors who are like, hey, look, if you've been stuck inside the last 6 weeks or almost 8 weeks now, your immune system is like so low right now that you're susceptible at this point.
Right.
Probably most people have gone a little bit out and about, whether it's to the grocery or things like that, but to then just kind of have like almost like a baby immune system at this point. Do you feel like that is a something people should be considering?
Yeah, I mean, on top of that, I mean, just from what you said, I agree. On top of that, I think that there's so much stress surrounding the coronavirus because of, how the media just really, that's all we talk about is coronavirus, coronavirus, people dying and doom and gloom all the time. And people are losing their jobs. And obviously, because the media is so negative, that creates stress in us. But then on our own personal level, we have our own stresses of not having a job or losing an income, having our children at home, whatever the stress may be that we're now incurring, that itself lowers our immune system. So not
Right.
only does being inside and not doing anything and maybe not getting the exercise that you need, and going out socializing, which actually boosts your immune system because you've got good chemicals in your brain that are forming because of socialization. But now, like I said, the stress is building up and that lowers your immune system too. So now we're reintroducing ourselves into the world, like you said, with this kind of lowered immune system based upon all of those factors.
Right. I think that, that's got to be a concern for people. And, so we still, in my opinion, just don't seem to know as a society as a whole what we should be doing. And so, I don't feel like, yeah, now we have some numbers and things, but I still don't feel like we're giving people like that sense of, okay, release, then, release, and you can go back out and everything's fine. Like we still don't have that. And then like, I don't know about you, but, people that I know, whether, personally or just like on social media and things, like they're very divided right now. And that's also presenting its own set of issues as to like stay home forever, or go out now just full force. And, people are like fighting with each other. And there's just so many different, to me, layers going on that, not that you want to necessarily, worry about something on this major global scale happening, again and again or whatever, but, we need a better plan.
Right. And I honestly think that this is where, it's so vital to be prepared for any particular kind of crisis that happens in your life, because I see what you're saying as a more of a reactive type stance, right? Where people are still reacting to what's going on and they're not looking at, well, what can I do to prevent myself from getting sick if I do go out? Right.
Right.
We're still reacting to the coronavirus at this point. And, just the way that our country and people and the government, and on a personal level, we just react to situations. That's really just, that leaves things up to question, right? That leaves it up to maybe like irrational thinking and thought processes. And so if we are taking that step to be more proactive in whatever, our hygiene, our nutrition, our exercise, getting out and, making sure that we're not exposing ourselves to people that are sick, and doing those proactive things, then there shouldn't be much of a worry to be able to leave our house
Right.
if we're taking those proactive measures.
Right. I think that, I've always been a huge believer in personal responsibility. And to me, that means like also thinking for yourself and, making decisions that make the most sense for yourself. How do you think that the individual can, what are some tips to be more proactive? Like, where can they learn how to be more, proactive instead of reactive?
Well, I think just looking, evidence based, looking at the way that people react in general is a good starting point, just to educate yourself on why being reactive doesn't work. Right. So, I mean, if you just consider some maybe personal cases of like, say you found out that you had stage 4 cancer, right? Well, what do? You go out and you go get chemotherapy or you get radiation, you get surgery. These are reactive things that people do. And you see this all the time, right? People are always reacting to physical things that are coming up. So, I mean, it's quite obvious that when physical problems come up and say they've gotten to a point where it's just too far, that it makes more sense to say, well, maybe I should step back and take some proactive measures so that way I don't get there. So, and as far as like this physical the physical aspect of the whole coronavirus is, just making sure that you are taking care of your body the best way that you can take care of your body to not eliminate, because you're not going to eliminate all things because your body is susceptible anyways, but to at least decrease your chances of maybe suffering from severe symptoms if you were to catch something. I know that the news says that there are what they say are healthy people that are dying from the coronavirus, right? And of course, we don't really know their background and what their genetic makeup is and all of that, and that does happen. But I would say more times than not, if you take care of your body, you're going to have a boosted immune system, and you will have a better chance of fighting these things off. And so that's through eating well, right? Staying away from, we talked about this in our last interview that we had, but staying away from sugars, things that inflame your body, and those are like grains and things that just don't digest well in your body. Alcohol, that's a huge inflammatory. And of course, people are drinking a lot of alcohol right now.
Yeah.
And that's, of course, that's a reactive thing. People are like, I don't know how to deal with this. I'm sitting at home. I don't know what to do with my thoughts. I'm going to drink alcohol and numb myself. So obviously that's being very counterproductive to what you need to be to take care of your body. So just paying attention to your nutrition. Drinking a ton of water is a huge thing, because as your stress increases, as you're sitting home and all of this is happening around you, there's a stress hormone called cortisol that builds up in your body, and you need to get that out of your system. And you have to do that through drinking a bunch of water. You flush it out of there. So that's something we should be doing on a daily basis. So regardless of pandemic or not, those are things that we should be doing on a daily basis. And our country is so backwards when it comes to nutrition and, what we should be eating or not be eating. It's completely upside down, with how we should be taking care of our bodies. So that's the first thing. And then, mental health is obviously a huge piece to this, because as a counselor, I'm on an app as a contractor called Talkspace, and I'm getting a huge influx of people every day, just constantly coming at me, 5 people sometimes at once. And they're like, I have so much anxiety. I'm not working. All of a sudden I'm sitting home, and now I have to deal with all of these past experiences or these thoughts that are coming up, and I don't know what to do with them, right? People aren't used to feeling their feelings. They numb them, and with substances or their jobs or whatever distraction they choose at the time. And so I've always said as a counselor that I feel like mental health is a very preventative tool to use, that it shouldn't necessarily be used when all of a sudden you are starting to hallucinate, or when you're having a panic attack, or when your marriage fell apart. It's useful for those things, for sure. But I see it more as a preventative tool to say, hey, maybe, I can learn some coping skills. Maybe I can learn to meditate. Maybe I can learn how to manage my emotions better. So that way, when something like this happens, I can cope with it, right? I can sit with my feelings. I know who I am. These mental health types of processes are in place, so that way I'm not having a panic attack when a pandemic occurs.
Right. Which, I guess you can say, like, it's kind of makes sense that people would be with something at such global scale that we're dealing with it. It's going to not be easy. But you're also talking about, when just regular life is happening, that people might not be prepared because they never sharpen those skills that they should have.
Right. Exactly. So, if you think about it from a job perspective, when you are in a job, you typically are trying to sharpen your skills all the time, right? So that way you can keep your job going, so you can keep getting paid. So maybe you can climb a corporate ladder of some sort. And I think of why aren't people doing that at this point with all aspects of their life? Why why aren't we sharpening our skills to have better mental health or better physical health? All of those things are going to make us succeed in life, pandemic or not.
Yeah, I feel like, one of my businesses is the, real estate. And I've watched agents over the years that, they get all into their career. They're working, 70, 80 hours a week. They're making a lot of money. And next thing you know, their health is declining, their marriages are declining, like so many things fall away because they're just focused on that one thing. So maybe even a word that would be helpful is like some kind of like balance, a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
For
Do you-
sure. Yeah. I mean, I was just talking to a client about this yesterday, I believe, and it was about making sure that you do have that balance in your life, because if you focus all of your energy in one particular spot in your life, you're not going to have any energy or room for anything else, which kind of creates, like you said, a sense of balance, but even more so, just a sense of identity,
Mhm.
and feeling like there is something else out there other than maybe just your job or whatever it is that you're investing in. You have to have balance in your life, and I mean that's specifically like you have to have that physical balance, where you're feeling well. You have to have a mental health, good mental health, good possible, spiritual or soul type, health there too. Social, socialization is super important. All of those things need to be in balance in order for you to feel like you're functioning okay in life.
Mhm. Have you had a lot of people that are maybe like, hey, I've had this role, like maybe I'm a mom and a wife, and that's like who I am and my whole identity surrounding this. And then, they come to you, when something happens or changes something. And now they're like, they don't know really who they are or how to make themselves happy or how to take care of themselves because they've been so busy maybe taking care of others. Do you see that a lot in your practice?
I'm trying to clarify in my head what you're asking. I
I
mean,
guess
just
like back to like taking care of oneself when people are maybe so focused on others, like
mhm.
whether it's, their husband or wife or their children or their, elderly parents or whatever maybe they just had to focus on. I'm wondering if that would have helped them now because they had their own self like in a more like stable position.
um, well, I think maybe what you're asking is like, when you're invested in one particular thing.
Mhm.
Is that what you're asking? Like if
Yeah,
you're invested in one
I was
particular thing?
sorry, I was kind of just going off when you were talking about like identity and
Mhm.
like who you are, like whether they're like all about their career, or maybe they're all about like this other, like title they wear instead of like who they like are wholly, you know what I mean? Taking care of all aspects of their being.
Right. Yeah. And it's super important to really, form that identity, to be able to see that you have more in life than just maybe that one role. I oftentimes see people getting lost in like their marriage, where they see their role as just taking care of their husband or just taking care of their children. And so then when that role gets taken away from them, they feel like they have a lack of sense of purpose. And
Yeah.
I think that's probably what a lot of people are feeling right now with this whole thing. People who've lost jobs or are losing that social ability to be out there, maybe to help people, and or teachers who are out there, not, I mean, they're teaching, but it's not the same kind of role, but you do lose the sense of purpose in that. And so having other things that you can fall back on to say, I still have a purpose in my life. I do have an identity outside of being a mom, being a wife, being a teacher, being a counselor. I have other things going on in my life that I can fall back on and say, I enjoy those things and can pour my energy into. And those are good, healthy things. So that way, when you have nothing else going on, you're sitting at home doing nothing, you can do those things. You can enjoy it and say, I have these things that are for me. That's part of self-care, right?
Yeah, and I think that, given everyone's has a little more time maybe at the house, depending on what their careers are. Some people are busier than they were before, but other people, most people I think have been realizing they have more time at home, and they're really, they're maybe taking up something they used to enjoy, art or gardening or these kind of things. But, would you say that that's so important, even if it's only a few minutes here and there, that you're able to do those things, that to keep incorporating that moving forward?
Absolutely. And I am really focusing on that with many of my clients. One of my number one questions is, what changes are you going to keep moving forward when you go back to work?
Yeah.
I have a mom who, is an attorney, works a ton of hours. She kept saying, I want to spend more time with my kids. I want to spend more time with my kids. And now she has that time with them, and the kids are loving it. And, love having a mom home, being kind of the house mom again. And I said, all right, well, what are you going to keep life looking like this when you go forward? Because you see the benefits in it.
Yeah.
And, what are the benefits, and continuing to remind them like why this is so beneficial for you to keep this life balance going after you go back to work or life goes back to normal, when things reopen. So absolutely, we need to have that balance. And some of the things that are happening with the pandemic are not bad. People's lives are slowing down, and teaching us a lot coming out of this.
Yeah, I really like that. Just in my casual conversations with people, and I'm definitely an inquisitive person, so I just ask people, and I was asking someone the other day, like, they had a very busy schedule, two kids that, between her and her husband, they were used to be running every evening, here, there, here, there, here, there. And, they're like, this is so different, now they're working from home and the kids are doing their school from home. And I'm like, well, do you think moving forward, you're going to jump right back into what it was? Or are you, like you said, going to change some of it? And this person was like, oh no, we'll probably just go right back to it. Like, this was just totally a break for them. And I'm like, wow, like, to think that like none of that really made you like reconsider it at all, you know?
Right. Yeah. And that, I mean, kind of just on another subject of, um, being proactive. I mean, I'm thinking about people's finances too. I mean, this is not a mental health thing, but I mean, finances do affect our mental health.
Yeah.
When you don't have money, it's very anxiety provoking, and I think about how many people weren't prepared, to lose their job, and
Yeah.
how many people were not financially responsible enough to put money aside. And I get that, some people can't, because, there is definitely, um, a gap there between, people who, some people who are just less advantageous, socioeconomically. So I get that some people can't, but, I wonder what if people will take this as a sign to just do more budgeting. That's something that
Yeah. Well,
I
I would say that even like people I know that earn a lot of money, I've been watching some of the things they're saying, and they've looked at like their business expenses, for instance, and they're like, I'm down 70% from, the month before this happened of what I'm spending. I look at, my credit card statement, let's say, and they're like, don't need that anymore. That's not essential, all these kind of things. So they're like able to get rid of a lot of things that, you know, how easy it is. Like, we sign up for, you know, Netflix and Hulu and, all these little, maybe a software here and a this there and a this. And when you look at, $10 here, $20 here, and it starts adding up, and you're like, wow, I could have a few hundred extra dollars a month, or, some people a few thousand extra dollars a month that, they actually have found because of this.
Oh, absolutely. I think, people aren't running to Starbucks and spending $5 on a coffee, or going out to lunch every day because they can do it because they're in downtown Fort Myers. People are saving a ton of money in gas. I know I am. Like,
Yeah,
wow, I haven't gone through a tank of gas in like a month.
I'm like, it's sitting on 3/4 of a tank. Where am I going?
So, and that's great. And I think to myself, like, I think, like, well, all right, well, do I really need to run out every time? I mean, this is nice not having to spend 20 or $30 every week on gas. Those are pennies saved, and it's very noticeable.
Yeah, I think it's super important. And I think that, hopefully that's one thing that people take away from this, what they can remove from their life that maybe wasn't that important and reprioritize, like you said, like how many people really weren't spending time with their family or with themselves. Like I think that's a thing that a lot of people, if you do have to sit with yourself for too long, that can be scary for people. Are
Hmm.
you finding that a lot, like now where people have this downtime with themselves?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, people, we were actually have been taught in our society to shut our feelings off. That's been such a huge common denominator, in mental health, is that people have shut their feelings completely down, and it's normalized to do that. People try to numb their feelings, through substances, or they were just taught maybe growing up that they need to just not express themselves, or whatever the situation was. People have been taught that it's not normal to feel. And now that we are sitting around and we have nothing left to do except feel,
Right.
people are like, what do I do? I don't know what to do with these overwhelming feelings. It's like an alien's taking over their body, and they're like, and they start having panic attacks, and it's very, very overwhelming. So, I'm teaching people how to, start meditating and to start really being comfortable, actually, more so than anything, with these feelings. Like, it's normal. I don't know why this just popped up in my brain. I'm kind of humorous sometimes, but I think of Pinocchio, and it's like, hey, you're a real person. You you have feelings. You have things that you've never felt before, or kind of an analogy of like somebody who was blind but now can see. You can see the world for what it is, and it's overwhelming when you first see it. But after a short period of time, you can recognize that your feelings and your thoughts are normal, and that they're valid. Um, Sorry, something popped up there. So
Did
you
you get
can.
this gift from Zoom? I got a gift from Zoom too.
But I think that's a huge piece of the puzzle, is just recognizing that having feelings and having thoughts are normal, and that you need to sit with them, and you need to recognize that they're there, and validate those feelings for yourself, regardless of who has said in the past that your feelings aren't valid. Just say, this is good. I have feelings. I'm a real person. I'm not dead. you know there's a lady that talks about emotional agility, and I absolutely love her. I just finished her book, Susan David. She talks about how people are too scared to show up to their feelings because they're difficult and you don't know what to do with them, and people react. Again, people
Right.
react to their feelings in a really negative way. But if you can show up to your feelings and use them in a very directive way, you can use them to be very helpful to you to make better decisions for yourself. And to look at them objectively is another important piece. So yeah, anyways, going back to the original, yes, I see that a lot. And I work a lot with people to try to normalize those feelings and get them to start really feeling them, instead of feeling them just during this short time during this pandemic. It's something that we need to be doing at all times. Again, just more of a proactive approach. We need to understand that we need to feel those feelings no matter, what we're going through, and be able to cope with them.
That's really good. It actually just kind of made a question process through me personally, just when you're saying that, how, I hear people a lot, like, about their feelings. And I think that, you have people across all spectrums as to how they present those feelings or deal with those feelings, from people that seemingly have none to the people that have like so many that, they just, everything wears on them, and you can see exactly what's going on with people at any time. Is there a way to know, like, hey, is this a helpful feeling or a non-helpful feeling, or do you consider all feelings helpful? Like, how do you get from like maybe a more quote unquote negative feeling to work through that to not have too many of those maybe negative feelings? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, the feelings are always valid. So the feelings, the emotions, so people put feelings and thoughts into the same category, and they're completely separate things. So feelings and emotions are the exact same thing. those are things that are always going to be valid. You feel it, it's in you, you feel the butterflies, you feel a headache, whatever it is, those are always going to be valid. You should pay attention to those. What you need to really be looking at more would be the thoughts, that are creating the feelings. So the thoughts are, I'm going to die from coronavirus. I'm never going to get my job back. These very black and white, all or nothing type of thinking patterns that a lot of people have. And basically to identify whether or not a thought is rational or not is to maybe pay attention to how you're feeling after the thought, right? If it creates so much anxiety and panic in you, then chances are the thought is going to be irrational, or it's going to be like what we call catastrophizing. We catastrophize things a lot, which, I could probably talk a little bit about the government with this, and how things have been catastrophized, but people catastrophize all the time. And when you do that, that's when that anxiety is provoked inside of you. So paying attention to how your body is responding to the thought you're having is more important. And you can identify whether or not what you're thinking is rational or not rational, and then change your thoughts based upon that feeling. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. Because I guess, and again, like I said, I'm an observer and like inquisitive person. So just watching others is always interesting to me. But and again, this could be considered judgy, but it's more just because I'm interested, and I, just how people, feel through things and process through things. And there's some people that to me seem completely like unaffected by anything, and they just go through like either they're very stern or they're just way up flighty, maybe, that just, oh, everything's great and wonderful always, and I wonder if that's healthy. Are they dismissing maybe real feelings and emotions that are coming through them that probably they might want to pay attention to? And then there's also the people, like I said, on the whole other end that are constantly like, you could say anything and to them they can turn it into something negative, like you said, like the end of the world, we're all going to die kind of, scenarios. And then of course, I think that a lot of people are somewhere in the middle. They have down days and happy days and these kind of things. But is it just as bad to like ignore everything and just, oh, everything's great and fine and wonderful?
Yeah, to be ignorant is not a good thing. So, we don't want to be running around being ignorant people. But I do find that there are genuine people out there who can cope really well with all things in life because they've been given the tools to do it. And that may come across as being ignorant, or not caring, or shutting their feelings down and maybe repressing some things. That can be viewed as that. I would say it's probably pretty rare that you find people like that.
Yeah.
And there are probably more instances of people who repress their feelings, and just compartmentalize, which means, we're putting these in a box and putting them on a shelf somewhere, not thinking about them. People who just say, well, I need to be strong, I need to be tough, and so I'm not going to let that worry or sadness or fear come out. So there are a lot of people like that, and it's very, very unhealthy. That's called bottling, and typically people who bottle also tend to brood, which is sitting there ruminating and thinking about those thoughts that they're repressing.
Yeah. And that then of course, like, and we talked about this a little in our last chat too, that how our whole body is one. So like our thoughts and our physical, so that's gonna all like settle somewhere in your body and your health, and your physical as well as just the mental. And I think that a lot of people separate that and don't realize that it's all combined and all important.
Yeah, it's an interesting phenomena that people don't really connect the mind and the body together, because the mind is part of the body. It's in my head. My head is part of my body. Why are we disconnecting the two? It's all going to be connected for sure. It's not just, they're not separate entities.
Yeah, well, I think of it too. I mean, it's fine to be like, you know, doctors that have specialties and stuff like, I'm a podiatrist, I'm just going to look at your foot, or, and I understand situations like that. But I think that we have so many things like that, that it's, our mindset has changed to think, okay, well, my foot is separate from my ankle, from my knee, from my brain, from, you know what I mean? Like to just see it all separately. And I don't know, where that necessarily comes from, but I feel like in our society that a lot of people just look at things totally separate in that.
Yeah, and it's kind of, I think of the old song, the knee is connected to the whatever
Yeah.
bone. And I think I talked about that last time. It's like, we need to get back to the basics. It is all connected. Um, Maybe there's too many specialties. I don't know.
I
We,
almost feel like that. Like I get like sometimes you need to go to a specialist, but sometimes I'm like, well, maybe that's the problem, because like if you're zoomed in so tight on something, you're not seeing something on, a zoomed out perspective.
right, right, exactly. And I think that that says a lot for mental health, really. It's really easy to focus in on one specific problem and not see the whole picture, which is what I do. As a counselor, I step back and I try to look at the whole body, and I say,
Yeah.
hey, what's going on? I mean, you might be having anxiety, and I could be as narrow minded to say, well, let's just think of some coping skills, right? Let's think of some meditations that you can do, and be very narrow minded like that. But I step back and I look at the whole person and say, well, what's going on in your life? What's causing this anxiety? What feelings are you having? Are there any physical issues that are going on with you that might create this anxiety for you? What are you eating? What does your daily life look like? Just really stepping back and analyzing the whole picture is super important to preventative maintenance.
I think that's super important, and I love that, because I'm sure that you have most, if not, I'd say a lot of people that would reach out to you initially to be like, hey, I'm having an issue with my job, or an issue with my spouse, or it's something like that. And then when you can help them to see all of it and how it all works together, because most people are like, hey, I only want to deal with this, like I don't need to talk to you about all these other things, like I just want to focus on this one little thing that's bothering me at this moment.
Right. No, and a lot of people do that. And I think I'd mentioned compartmentalizing, and people do that all the time. They think that, their family life doesn't affect work, or, what they're doing on the computer doesn't affect their family life. And, they compartmentalize all these little things that they do in life, and they think that they don't affect each other, but they do. They blend in together, and they're all connected. Um, so we can't compartmentalize like that. Everything that we do is connected completely. And so you have to step back. Otherwise, you're doing a disservice to yourself by thinking that things aren't interconnected like that.
Yeah. I know that, like, for me, like I coach real estate agents and stuff, and obviously I'm not a mental health counselor or anything, but I do have some skills with that. But a lot of the conversation will stem around like personal life in general, and whether we talk about their health for a little bit because obviously they've been working too much, or they can't work more because of the health, or whatever, the family life comes up a lot, and people spend a lot of time talking about that, even though it's a quote unquote business coaching session.
Hmm.
So I
Yeah,
think,
it's important. I mean, you have to focus on other areas in order, like you said, in order to just talk about one thing, there's a lot more things that'll influence it.
yeah. So,
Sure.
well, pulling everything back together, I mean, we talked about so many different ways that people could be more proactive, and especially if we combine kind of what we talked about in, our last conversation with this one. I mean, what would be kind of, a couple of things like that you would want to say, like, most important to consider, or, move forward with, that we did kind of mention today?
Well, I think one of the first things I would say would be for people to just step back and look at their lives before this, and look at how detrimental it was not to be prepared. I feel like people have more fear and anxiety about things because they're not prepared for things, right? So if a hurricane were to come through Southwest Florida, and people don't have water and sustainable food in their house, and all of those things, and then all of a sudden, we have no power, how are you going to feel about that? Because you weren't prepared. So you need to step back and look at what you've learned. What have you learned about yourself through this whole thing, and use that to educate yourself to move forward, to do something different with your life.
Mhm.
If, and of course, it might just be one or two things. If you feel like, I'm kind of thinking about like exercise, all the gyms are closed, right? Um, that that can be something that you could focus on very easily. Like, a lot of people stopped going to the gym, and so they stopped exercising. Well, what do you have in place for that? Do you have a plan for maybe getting out and doing something at home? Can you put something in your home for future use in case you're stuck in your house again? That's just a kind of a silly example, but just, it's something that people are struggling with at this moment. So using it to educate yourself in order to make changes. What can I do to financially prepare myself again for some other crisis, whether it's personal or global? What mental health steps can I take to strengthen my mind in order to cope with anxiety better? What can I do to strengthen my family, so that way if we're all stuck together again, we're not trying to kill each other. What can I do with that? And that's huge. People don't realize that they need to work, and it takes a lot of work to keep a family together and keep them happy. What physical things can you do for yourself? What are things that you've noticed coming out of this, or, just in that reactive stance, that you can do differently so you don't react the same way again, or don't need to feel like you have to react because you're ready,
Yeah.
right? You are prepared. So I want people to really analyze how they've been affected, and move forward with that to educate themselves and make changes, so they don't react in the future to anything. You don't have to have, your reactions, you can see reactions as feelings. People react normally through emotions, and that's fine. But I think we react more on a larger scale that is unhealthy. Oh my gosh, what do I do? And that's more of the reaction, this lost feeling. We shouldn't feel lost. We need to be prepared, so that way we have a plan in place no matter what happens.
I like that. I think one of the things that I've been seeing a lot of people trying to share and discuss also is like, what can I control? Because there's so many things that are going to happen that are completely out of all of our control, but you can control, like you said, your reactions and your feelings and what you're going to do from there. And you can take that even with little things like, oh, a coworker made you upset today, or, the store didn't have what you needed. They had no toilet paper, like even those little day-to-day things that are going to happen. And okay, well, but what can I control?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And there's a lot that you can control. We can't control the world around us, but we can control how we deal with ourselves and how we live our lives. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. So awesome. Well, I'm going to post all your contact information again in case anyone, wants to reach out for you for, a consultation, just to kind of, again, like it doesn't have to be just you have something crazy going on in your life right now. It's good to just kind of learn some of these skills anyways, right?
Yep. Yep. Build these tools that you need for the future. I've always said that it doesn't matter what life circumstance you're in, everybody should have somebody that they can counsel with, just to, live a more productive, happy life.
I agree. Love that. Well, again, thank you so much for your time today. And hopefully tomorrow is a beautiful day and we can, have some sunshine.
Yeah. Get outdoors. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.